There we go.
Hi there, Carol. How are you?
Rabbi, okay.
Good.
How's it going there with everything? Preparations.
Just a lot of preparation, studying
Yeah.
for the Siyum and preparing, obviously, for this class, and the few Shiva Minyanim, and the problems I had last night getting on were just driving me crazy. And then just everything else that's going on. But thank God, most of it is really, really good. The things that have been happening at the synagogue have been very successful, and I'm looking forward to tomorrow night's dinner. We've got over 40.
There's a dinner tomorrow night.
There's a Shabbat dinner tomorrow night.
Why do I not know this? Okay.
I'm sorry, it's a kind of a crazy topsy-turvy breakfast for dinner, Erev April Fool's Shabbat dinner.
Oh, okay. Okay, crazy. Well, that's good. I'm glad you have people.
Yep.
That's good.
How are you doing?
I'm doing fine, just the usual, pre-Pesach panic,
Yeah.
pre-Pesach panic.
Kind of challenging for everybody.
Well, my stove, I don't know what to do because it's got this stupid, it's self-clean, but it's aqua cleaning, which you just pour water into the bottom of it, but it never goes beyond 300 degrees. I don't know. So now I just set it for 500 degrees, as if I was baking something. And
right, you just put it, just clean the oven and then put it on its highest setting for like 20 minutes. So that's basically what we do.
Doing. Yeah.
We have a new oven, so
so good. Yeah. Well, I have an air fryer that I never used, and I still don't know how you use it, but I figured, okay, I get that. And I got a new crock pot. So
good.
But I'm not even, doing all that much. But yeah, I got to figure out this air fryer. I just reading the instructions.
Yeah, we have a new air fryer, and it's normally we try and buy all of our appliances, if we're buying any, right before Pesach. So at least we can use them for
at least for that year, you got,
Yeah.
Yeah.
But
So,
our microwave and our oven, we have to kosher anyway, and ours is a cooktop, and we had a cooktop before. I don't really like koshering cooktops because you just boil water on it, but that scares me still.
I don't know. I keep reading different things. I've got a quartz countertop, and then I thought it was enough to pour boiling water on it. And then I read another site that said, even with quartz, you got to cover it. And I hate covering because it just makes a mess. So I guess, I don't know. But,
hi, everyone.
Hi. Hi, everybody.
Good morning, or now good afternoon.
Yeah.
I hope it warms up a little because the poor trees are starting to blossom.
Yes, and I don't want them to die.
Yeah, now it's cold.
Yeah.
But it's going to be warm for Pesach at least.
Is it cold today?
It's cool. It's in the 30s.
I left my house at 8 o'clock this morning. It was 25 degrees out.
I know last night it was cold, but I didn't know.
Yeah. It's
Getting
warm
a
up, it's still very Windy.
Yeah, but the sun is out at least, so, okay, so that's good.
Okay. Let me. Yeah, okay, let me get everything. Hopefully this will be readable. And let me share the other screen. Yes,
I can read. Just,
there we go. Okay. We're not going to be on this for very long. Could everybody see it?
yeah,
Okay, good. So we are now up to Parashat Tzav, much of which seems to be a repetition of what we saw last week in describing the sacrifices. But one key difference, of course, is in the beginning. In the beginning of Parashat Vayikra, we are told, Moses is told to speak to the children of Israel and outline all of their responsibilities. On the other hand, we see at the beginning of our parasha, God tells Moses, Tzav et Aharon ve'et banav lemor, command Aharon and his sons, saying, Zot Torah ta'olah, goes on to describe the procedures for the burnt offering. Now we are getting the instructions for the sacrifices from the perspective of the priests. So that's one major difference. The way the sacrifices are organized is a little bit different. But what I'd like to do is to begin to look at some of the stuff that we're going to be talking about today. I want to continue with the notion of how do we understand Vayikra? Conceptually, and what's going on in the text. It's a text that is on one hand very far removed from us, because our mode of worship is not through offerings of animals and grains necessarily. The whole people are, as we talked about last time, people are turned off by it, but one has to recognize there's a lot more going on in this text. And I came across a great line from a book that I do not yet have, and I'm embarrassed to say I do not yet have it. Mary Douglas's work, Leviticus as Literature. Mary Douglas was an incredible anthropologist, and she did a lot of work on the Bible, particularly on Vayikra and on Bamidbar. And a lot of her insights, I've seen some of her articles, but I don't know why I still haven't gotten her books, which are fascinating. And in one of his Divrei Torah for the seminary, Chancellor Eisen was commenting on how he is just appreciating her book and how wonderful it is. And he brings out this quote where she talks about philosophizing by sacrifice, which is just kind of an interesting turn of phrase that, we look at the system of korbanot and of menachot, etc., as very concrete physical actions. But Douglas and many others recognize that this really is, there's a whole system of thought behind it, or systems of thoughts behind it. And so I want to look, first of all, for Jacob Milgram's introduction. Some of this stuff we covered last week, but I just think it's worthwhile to kind of put these things into perspective when we just, before we approach the text, to understand perhaps theoretically what's going on in the text. And then we can get into all of the details. And indeed, much of Milgram's great work has been going into all of the picayune details of the different elements of Vayikra to be able to tease out what is the theology, or what are the ideas, the religious ideas that stand behind the text. So this is a long section from his introduction. I don't know if I did a great job in summarizing it, but I tried to capture some of his central ideas, which are important for all of Sefer Vayikra. I also should give a caveat that I'm not trying to say that the only way to understand Vayikra is to understand it through the eyes of Milgram. There are other commentators who have written on this book, first of all of Milgram's students. And, as Yehudi mentioned last week, one of the twins, Milgram is one of the twins with Baruch Levine, alav shalom. Both of them have passed away, Milgram and Levine, but they were specialists in the priestly materials. And they both had tremendous insights. And a younger scholar who I guess probably is not all that young anymore because he's just a few years older than I am. He was my teacher, Baruch Schwartz, at Hebrew University. He's been doing a lot of work on the priestly theology, not to mention all the other scholars who've been working on it. But still, I think that Milgram captures certain ideas that are accepted by many, and they at least give us one toehold in understanding this complex, but as we talked about last week, central and crucial book within the Torah, within the Tanakh as a whole. So who would like to begin?
I will.
Okay, thank you, Susie.
Theology is what Leviticus is all about. It pervades every chapter and almost every verse. It is not expressed in pronouncements, but embedded in rituals. Indeed, every action, whether movement, manipulation, or gesticulation, is pregnant with meaning. At their deepest level, rituals reveal values which are sociological facts.
Yeah, Victor Turner was a very, very famous anthropologist. And anthropologists, in looking at ritual systems or rites, or what we would call mitzvot within our tradition, look at how human beings kind of structure their experiences and how they put certain ideas into practice, or how certain practices reflect particular ideas. That some elements of ritual systems may be arbitrary, but within the context of the system, they're not so arbitrary. They're trying to present certain ideas, or what's standing behind them are likely certain ideas. And, we often talk about primitive religion, but most anthropologists don't like that term. They will say, pre-scientific, that the ritual systems, the religious systems of ancient peoples are anything but primitive. They're often very complicated and complex. Okay, go ahead, Susie.
The priestly theology negates the premises of paganism. It posits the existence of one supreme God who contends neither with a higher realm nor with competing peers. The world of demons is abolished. There is no struggle with autonomous foes because there are none. With the demise of the demons, only one creature remains with demonic power, the human being. Endowed with free will, his power is greater than any attributed to him by pagan society. Not only can he defy God, but in priestly imagery, he can drive God out of his sanctuary. Humans can drive God out of the sanctuary by polluting it with their mortal and ritual sins. Moral and ritual sins. All that the priest can do is periodically purge the sanctuary of its impurities and influence the people to atone for their wrongs.
Yeah, so this is certainly something that that Milgram learned from Yechezkel Kaufman, who very much emphasized the distinction between pagan worldview and the view of Judaism. They're really, and Milgram in his commentary and many other Jewish commentaries frequently demonstrate how Vayikra and other parts of the Bible as well kind of purge the Bible of what may have been some of its more pagan roots or pagan ideas.
Is that a little bit overstating the case, though, when you think about the references to the Seirim in chapter 18?
Yeah, You know,
Or
one of the
16
things,
rather, 16 rather.
yeah, you know, one of the things that Milgram points out is that, you know, this emptying out the demonic pagan ideas from Judaism didn't happen all at once. And it's true that we see a number of those reflections within the biblical text, but sometimes it's so muted. So even when we come to Azazel, we mentioned referring to the Seirim, Azazel, we send off Seir Mishtalech, the
Scapegoat.
goat, that's the scapegoat, you know, is sent off to the wilderness to Azazel. Now, Azazel was probably a
Wilderness.
demon, or in contemporary terms, he's a character from the X-Men, but there are a lot of Jews in comic books. But you know, it's so muted. There's not really a Azazel, you know, really only appears, you know, where the goat is sent to. It's so
It's played down. I agree. It's
Totally,
definitely
yeah.
played down.
But you know, there are certain, I mean, there are all kinds of poetic metaphors as well throughout the Bible. But you know, I think there are some things that you can't totally hide the background. I mean, we're coming up to Pesach. You know, what did we do with the blood of the Paschal lamb? We put it on the doorposts and on the lintel. That became a great word, apotropaic, scares away the demons. You know, and it was anticipated, of course, that unusual story in the beginning of Shmot, where God seeks to kill Moses, at least Moses or his son, on his way back to Egypt, and Zipporah circumcises her son and touches the bloody foreskin to his feet, whether it's the son or Moshe's feet. You know, the point is the blood is used to scare away. Blood is an apotropaic in religious tradition, in Judaism. But as we'll see, as Milgram goes on, it's less the demonic that it's scaring away, but it's an act of cleansing and understanding something about life and death. We'll come to that, in fact, right now. Go on, Susie.
There is a common denominator to the sources of impurity, death. Because impurity and holiness are antonyms, the identification of impurity with death must mean that holiness stands for life. No wonder that reddish substances, the surrogates of blood, are among the ingredients of the purificatory rites. They symbolize the victory of the forces of life over death.
Yeah, we've talked about this before, that how many of the sources of impurity really are connected with death. First of all, dead bodies. You know, death certainly is, you know, a source of the highest form of ritual impurity, but even other forms of ritual impurity, sarat, it causes one to look like a corpse. It turns one white. The bodily emissions, they're not all bodily emissions, but bodily emissions specifically from the generative organs, from the sexual organs. So those are the things that cause ritual impurity. As I've mentioned many times before, my teacher at Greenstein used to talk about those things as life leaks. These are fluids that symbolize life or bring life. And if they're leaking out, that's bringing one closer to death. And the whole notion of life versus death, or the forces of life over death, is probably one of the greatest characteristics of Judaism. You know, really throughout its history, you know, from all kinds of halakha, life takes precedence. Much of our mitzvot can be put aside in order to save life or limb. None of these mitzvot aren't important, but saving life or limb is on an even higher level. we've mentioned before that if a funeral procession and a wedding procession happen to run into each other, the funeral procession has to wait for the wedding procession. And to some extent, that's reflected today in Israel. You know, Israel, which for most of its 75 years has literally struggled for its life. You know, and God forbid there is a pigua, a terrorist attack, you know, Israel gets back to life. Not that they don't acknowledge it, no, they don't hide it, but they move on. You know, it's you know, you know, in my own experience in Israel, you know, I was very lucky. Thank God I was never near any terrorist attack. But the terrorist attack happens, and then things keep going. There was a horrible bombing on I think it was bus 17 or 18 one of the years I was there. And on our bus route, we would pass the garage for Egged, the bus company. And the burned out hulk of the bus was there in the yard. But the buses were still running. There was a time when terrorists broke out of a sporting goods store in downtown Yerushalayim on Rehov Yafo, and the next night, that was also our bus stop. And the next night, we went down. Some of us went down to watch a movie, and sure enough, there were still bullet holes in the bus stop, but the buses were running, and life was back to normal.
Yeah, I was there in 2001, we arrived in Jerusalem right after Sbarro's bombing.
I was there then.
And there were other attacks for the next couple of weeks, and we just, you know, kept going. Everything kept proceeding.
Yeah, again, everyone acknowledges the pain, the loss, the horror, the anger, but, you know, ultimately we go on with life. My colleague, Danny Gordis, in his book, If a Place Could Make You Cry, his reflections on having made Aliyah just in the midst of the Second Intifada, you know, talks about precisely that, like the bombing at Sbarro, etc. So the notion of life over death is just so crucial in Judaism. Like the old joke, I think I've used it in a sermon, but the joke about God telling, you know, gathering together the Pope, the leading Imam, and the chief rabbi of Israel, and saying, you know, I'm disgusted with the world. Even though I promise not to flood it again, you guys screwed up, and I'm in 3 days I'm destroying the world with massive floods. So the Pope gets on and asks everyone to repent and pray to God so that they'll die in a state of grace and be resurrected. The Imam says everyone should, you know, acknowledge God's power and again, acknowledge their sin. The chief rabbi gets on and says, we have 3 days to learn to live underwater. You know, that's the Jewish perspective. And it comes right from our biblical texts. Go on, Susie.
Because the quintessential source of holiness resides with God, Israel is enjoined to control the occurrence of impurity lest it impinge on his realm. The forces pitted against each other in a cosmic struggle are no longer the benevolent and the demonic deities who populate the mythologies of Israel's neighbors, but the forces of life and death set loose by man himself through the obedience to or defiance of God's commandments. Despite all of the changes that are manifested in the evolution of Israel's impurity laws, the objective remains the same: to sever impurity from the demonic and to reinterpret it as a symbolic system reminding Israel of the divine imperative to reject death and choose life.
A very powerful understanding. You know, everyone, you know, I did my senior sermon on Tazria Mitzora, and I told you, my professor said you're going to speak on the Haftarah. I ended up weekend of Yom Ha'atzmaut, I spoke about Israel, but people come to that and they're like, oh God, I just like that. Even worse than Vayakhel Pekude for some people. They just cannot stand that. And yet, when you suddenly put it in the context of understanding what the real dynamic is behind the text, it's suddenly much more powerful. And as he says here, we reinterpret it as a symbolic system. We understand what is a symbolic system. It's a language. All languages are symbolic symbols. And when we understand so many of the rites of our tradition or the rituals, Yehudi, I'm very conscious of, that distinction that you correctly made, to realize that it's part of a whole system of symbols. It is a language in and of itself. Sometimes that language is very difficult, but it's nonetheless a language. When we start understanding the language, there's a lot more meaning that comes through. Like, I regret the fact that I never really, I kind of gave up on math after geometry. And, even though I did well, and not in geometry though, but if someone had explained to me that stop thinking of it as numbers, think of it as a language. Mathematics is a language. I would have had a wholly different understanding, or I would have had appreciation if I understood that earlier in my life.
I'd raise a quick question.
Okay, no, please do.
Obviously, tuma or impurity or altered state, and such is understood to affect Jews. Why, in your mind, does the status of a dead body of a Gentile not have any standing?
What do you mean?
Well, there are
There's
certain
no
things.
tuma from a non-Jew.
What does that mean? If a non-Jew dies and you're there or see
Yeah.
Yeah, there's no ritual impurity. There's no alteration of your status.
Right. If
A
you're
Kohen
if
can
you're
be
in a
there.
tent,
A Kohen can be there and nothing happens to him.
yeah, you can be in a tent with a dead body and you become ritually impure, but not so if it's a non-Jew. Yehudi, you raised your hand.
I just wanted to make a general comment about what's been set up till now. I think it's important, and I don't disagree at all with the way you're trying to approach this and give it meaning for modern people. But I do feel that there's a limit to this approach, and I think Rabbi Zucker just pointed out one of the limits to it, which is that there are times when that simply is not really going to fit. And you're going to have to deal with the fact that this whole enterprise was set up to deal with a mindset which was a lot different than ours is. It really, we did not want to frighten God away. Okay, we were terrified of the possibility that God would not want to live in our midst. I mean, look how Moshe gets all bent out of shape when Hashem says to him after the Egel, all right, I'm not going to destroy them, but I also have no intention of residing within them. I'll send one of my malachim to do that job. And the whole conversation between Moshe and Hashem is to get Hashem to basically say, no, you can't going to go use the Mishkan as a secondary residence. It's going to become your primary residence, and you're not going to send some secondary creature in there. You're going to have to come in there yourself, and obviously if we put in that much effort to getting him to come, then we certainly don't want to do anything to frighten him off. Now, here's where I basically think you have to understand something about mitzvah, which are that we don't understand every single particular particle of what's going on with a mitzvah. Why is it that tefillin have to be made completely from a products of a kosher animal, and you can't put any plant products in them whatsoever? I mean, in other words, I think we should realize what our limitations are. We can't put ourselves into the mindset of the ancients. We're just too far away from them to basically really put ourselves in their place and try to think the way they feel. And I think it would be a lot more dramatic if instead of studying it by way of Parshat Tzav, you try to study all this by way of, let's say, Masechet Zvachim or Masechet Nigaim or Masechet Parah. Once you get down to the real nitty-gritty of all this, it becomes apparent that so many of the things that we've been sold to explain things to us don't really work. Like, what's the purpose of segregating Mitzrayim? Well, because they carry an infectious disease and we're just quarantining them. Well, but then Rabbi Zucker would ask, and quite correctly, then how come Masechet Negaim says that we don't quarantine a Chatan and Kala? If the whole thing is an infectious disease, then what difference does it make whether it's a Chatan and Kala or not? Witness what happened during COVID, okay? In other words, modern science will never accept such a distinction. So I do feel that a point is reached where it's perhaps better to learn the details correctly, because at least once you learn that, you know it, than to go nuts to try to find out reasons that the reason we adopt today for something might just turn out 50 years from now to be totally exploded by some new archaeological or anthropological discovery, and I really have to thank you for pointing that out, Rabbi Zucker, because I think that's that where you're going to be able to explain that on the basis of life. Life of a human being is life of a human being, whether the human being is a Jewish human being or not a Jewish human being. So I think we do have to realize that I have my problems with Greenstein's argument that genital emissions are life forces. They're not. I mean, Zav is not a life force. It's the opposite. It's gonorrhea. I mean, it's very clear what's being spoken about there. A discharge brought about by a sexually transmitted disease. Is that a life force? I don't know. Is the reason we're putting blood on the door of the house after the Paschal sacrifice, is that to protect the house, or is it to make a sign to Hashem that to skip over the house? That's a totally different thing. Then the blood is an identification symbol, not a protective symbol. I'm just saying. I think we have to. I'm not in any way disparaging the effort. I think the effort should be made, and each and every generation has to make. But at the same time, we have to realize that any solutions you come up with in this generation, the next generation is going to find holes.
Yeah, it's like I said, you can't say that the only way to understand Leviticus is through Milgram. And I think you're raising a point that is a problem with all contemporary studies. If you take the literary studies of the Bible, they bring tremendous insights, and I particularly enjoy them. But our notions of what is a book, what is a text, what are the genre of literature, all that is contemporary. That's not necessarily what they thought of as literature, if you will, in the ancient world. We thought, did Israel have an ancient epic? Well, how do they understand epic? We've developed today, all kinds of epic laws of folk narrative and all that stuff. But that's contemporary definitions. It's not the ancient definitions.
Yeah, I'm talking about there's a certain apologetic tone that is not involved here when you study literature, but it is involved when you study Sefer Vayikra. In other words, if I sit there and study Tehillim, and I get involved with things like Sitz and Laban and all these other type of things that Google brought on board, there's no apologetic tone in that. That's just the tone of let's see if we can figure out more about ancient literature than we know. But when you study Sefer Ikra, people seem to have a feeling that they're ashamed of the book in some way. And they're going to have to fix it up so that they will no longer feel ashamed of it. And the result of that is we do a good deal of violence to it, because that's the only way we can get out from under the fact that a good deal of it makes us extremely uncomfortable. But my feeling is you're better off getting into the detail of what's going on and getting that straight, because as time goes on, things become more and more clear. What we don't know now, we may eventually know a great deal more of, but the one thing that's not going to change is what the details are. So we should find out, train ourselves to pay attention to detail.
I would agree, except for the fact that also, well, this is my job as a rabbi. I have to make these texts, I have to make our tradition intelligible to my community. And a scholar in an ivory tower doesn't necessarily have that problem. What I can do is learn from what scholars do, and that doesn't matter whether it is Greenstein and Milgram and Levine and Schwartz, or whether it's Rashi and Abarvanel and Kliyakar, or for that matter, Midrash and Zohar. What are the sources in our tradition? Because we're not the first people to struggle with this. Every generation struggles with it. And, how do we, why do we struggle with it? Why is it even worth it? Why can't we just look at this and say, forget it? No, so what if it's the Torah? There are plenty of people that do that. But, we want to find meaning in this. We believe this is Torah to emet. It is the Torah of truth, which contains eternal truths. So we struggle. This is one of the ways we struggle with the text. I totally agree that whatever we come up with this year may change next year. Very famous line, Dor, Dor, V'dor Shav. Each generation has its interpreters. It's why probably we have a Mikrot Gedolot, the rabbinic Bible, with you have the text in the middle and all the commentaries from different times and different places, all on the same page, because there are different ways of reading the text and understanding the text. And, I think you're right that ultimately it's the details. God is in the details, and we have to know the details.
I love that one.
Yeah, that's a really good one. But and that's particularly important when we're reading Vayakil Pekudei and Tetzaveh and Truma and Shmini and all Sefer Vayikra, actually. I mean, the details are crucial, but sometimes we just have to take a step back and remember that we have this bias, which is often apologetic, but we have to realize our biases, and then, despite our biases, what do we find in the text? Again, I don't think that you have to have Vayikra and Milgram. Milgram is very, very helpful. But part of Milgram's helpfulness is the fact that he does go into all the details. And he does look at all the specifics, from the language to the way it's used throughout the Tanakh, comparing it to other ancient Near Eastern materials. So I think that he certainly does not ignore the details. We're going to come to some details, hopefully. This is just kind of an overall perspective that, as I said before, it's not the only perspective. And I don't think it's the only way we could look at the text, but it is one particular approach. And I think the idea that we are often dealing with a language, a system of symbols, how we decode those symbols is going to change. How we understand how to decode those symbols is going to change. And we also have to realize that, by knowing the details, we know how those symbols, in fact, have changed. Language changes. So how,
and for that matter, certainly the politics behind some of the questions or the interpretations changes, and even in Milgram's writing, you see that.
Oh yeah. And ultimately, if you take the Art Scroll Chumash the Torah Modern Commentary by Plaut, and Eitz Chaim. You look at all of them, and in many ways, they're all important and great productions, but by the same token, they're all limited by their perspectives. And
What I think I'm trying to say is it's better to read Milgram for the details than for the explanations of the details.
yeah,
In
well,
other words, the details are not going to change. But the problem is that most of us are ignorant to the details and we're big on the explanations. So the result of that is that, in the next generation, we're going to pretty well be lost because they never even got the details straight in the first place.
listen,
So that's my approach is make sure at least you know what the details are because that's not changing. Okay. And the next generation may have a better explanation. Like, for example, once upon a time, the rage of oral commotion was Hertz commotion. All right. And basically, and we used it often actuals too. Hertz may have been a graduate of Jewish Theological Seminary. Didn't change the fact that American and British Orthodox, pretty much used him as their main Chumash until at least after the Second World War.
yeah,
And maybe later than that. But what I'm going with is today, when somebody reaches Hertz and you see Hertz's explanations, you just, you're more comfortable with his explanations than you ever were with Sefer Vayikra itself.
well, yeah.
That's the irony of it all,
Okay, but nonetheless, we're going to go on here.
Thank God. Okay.
Does somebody else want to continue? Or Susie, you're more than welcome to.
I'll give it up if somebody wants to.
Go
Anyone
ahead.
hankering to read Milgram? Okay, Susie, go ahead.
It would be well to point out that the blood prohibitions is an index of P's concern for the welfare of humanity. In Leviticus, to be sure, all of P is directed toward Israel, but one need only turn to the P stratum in Genesis to realize that it has not neglected the rest of mankind. P's blood prohibition in Genesis appears in the bipartite
Yes.
bipartite
two parts.
Noahide law, which states that the human society is viable only if it desists from the shedding of human blood and the ingestion of animal blood.
Yeah, so that's, after Noah, these were two prohibitions that were given to all of humanity.
Thus, it declares its fundamental premise that human beings can curb their violent nature through ritual means, specifically a dietary discipline that will necessarily drive home the point that all life, nefesh, shared also by animals, is inviolable.
Inviolable, yeah.
Yeah, inviolable.
Inviolable.
Except in the case of meat when conceded by God.
Yeah, so I think that something we've seen many times is, as people have looked throughout the generations and including today at the dietary laws, there's a seriousness about life that just pervades them. And it may not be the reason why many of us keep kosher, but it's certainly up there in one of the many reasons why we may keep kosher. I think that even though we could take a look at any of our commentaries and any of our the ways of looking at the text, whether it's Milgram or going back to Rashi and the rabbis or going, to later scholars, it doesn't mean that some of those reasons are not helpful, useful, or meaningful to individual Jews as we observe tradition. They may not be the only reason we observe tradition, and I think there are many ways and reasons why people observe different elements of the tradition in general. but sometimes they, if you will, they're just very nice ideas that not just inform, but enhance our practice. Go ahead.
The peace strand in Genesis also indicts the human race for its Hamas.
Violence, Hamas. Timalei haaretz Hamas. The world was filled with violence.
Because the Noahide laws of Genesis 9 is the legal remedy for Hamas, it probably denotes murder, as in Ezekiel, though in subsequent usage, especially under prophetic influence, it takes on a wide range of ethical violations. Thus, the blood prohibition proves that P is of the opinion that the universal God imposed a basic ritual code upon humanity in general. Israel, nonetheless, bound by its covenantal relationship with the deity, is enjoined to follow a stricter code of conduct.
Yeah, I mean, I think none of that is foreign to us, but it's something that certainly stands out. The prohibition on consuming blood, certainly the prohibition on taking life, but to see that is such an amazing overarching concern of the Tanakh doesn't mean it's not an overarching concern for many other cultures, or but certainly that's very much part of the whole culture that creates the ritual laws that, again, pointing to the fact that in the Bible, and this may sound apologetic, but I think it captures the totality of Judaism, that we don't make real distinctions between the so-called moral and ritual laws. They are all part of who we are as Jews. We have to observe all of them. So, it's wonderful that someone may be, what we would call shomer mitzvot, that they're very careful about kashrut, they're very careful about many pikiyun elements of Jewish law, but sometimes when it comes to some other elements of Jewish law, they're not so picky. So we had, sadly, an Orthodox rabbi in my town of Wilkes-Barre who was very popular with everybody. He was a wonderful guy, and he was in many ways open, but very meticulous in his own personal practice. He had 2 sets of glasses, so you knew you walked into his home, it was kosher for anyone. Now, his commitment to his wife, that sadly, he was not as meticulous in its observance. So, and we can say the same thing, that people say, well, you don't need all this ritual stuff to be a good person. Yeah, perhaps not. But take a look at a lot of really good people in the world, and they happen to be deeply connected to their religious traditions. And where do you hear discussions of these issues? But in religious circles, not secular society may talk about it, but it doesn't have any concrete ways of dealing with it and making it a living tradition. So it's just more about the totality of Judaism. Let's go on to one midrash, which here, saying that there's a connection, or that we find other ideas in the text. And I'm not trying to say this is pshat, but that we find in the text more than just the details, that we can expound on the details and derive other more theoretical kinds of lessons, or even practical lessons. This is something that goes throughout the tradition long before Milgram or Greenstein or anyone else. So here we have a midrash on the opening words of Vayikra, and this, I think, captures what so much of our tradition has done. The reality is that and why we're sometimes apologetic about Sefer Vayikra is so much of Vayikra became a moot point after the temple was destroyed, and certainly in the lands of Golah, in our exile. So, how do we still find meaning in something that really is not of practical significance? Certainly that changes a great deal when we return to Eretz Yisrael, and suddenly mitzvot hatluyot ba'aretz, mitzvot that are connected to the land, once again become rather important. And that was, throughout history, actually, anyone living in Eretz Yisrael, but much more of an issue within the Jewish community as we returned and rebuilt Israel. So this is Midrash Tanchuma. There are two versions. There is the Tanchuma collection, and then there was Tanchuma as discovered in a manuscript by a very famous Jewish scholar in the 19th century, Samuel Buber. Rabbi Zucker, Yehudi, can you tell me, was he related to Martin Buber? Suddenly I'm blanking.
I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't think they were related.
It was very distant. It was like like the way Theodore Roosevelt was related to Franklin Roosevelt. Yeah.
Yeah. The point is, however, that as important as Martin Buber may have been for 20th century Jewish thinking, Samuel Buber, Shmuel Buber, was tremendously important in dealing with our textual tradition. He doesn't need to be related to Martin Buber. I mean,
I think Martin Buber would not have been so pleased with,
maybe not, but Martin Buber could have gotten more zchut from being related to Shmuel Buber than the opposite, perhaps. So we have, our opening line by the Moshe Lemor, Sav et Aharon v'Epanav Lemor, and going on with the specific instructions. And here we see the word Torah used as instruction. Not necessarily referring to the whole Torah, but a specific set of instructions for a specific circumstance, or in this case, the individual offerings. Who would like to read?
I'll read, Rabbi.
Okay, thank you, Ricky.
Another interpretation of Leviticus 6:1-2:8-9. Then the Lord spoke, command Aaron, this is the Torah of the burnt offering. The Holy One said, fulfill what is written above on the matter.
In other words, what was written earlier in Vayikra.
Then after that comes, this is the Torah of the burnt offering. Why? Isaiah 61:8. Because I, the Lord, love justice. I hate robbery with a burnt offering, even with a burnt offering.
Yeah, so what is the Darshan trying to say here?
Well, it's connecting the end of the previous parasha as if this is one long text.
Yeah. So and probably addressing a little bit of the issue. It's absolutely, it's trying to explain the Smichut Parshiot, but also why is it repeating it? What is being added here by stating again Torah Ta'olah, if we already have the instructions for the Olah?
But we didn't have the term Zot Torah Ta'olah before.
Right.
But this is, the whole term Zot Torah is being introduced in Parshat Safed. So I think the real point of this midrash is to say that Torah Ta'olah is not just what you read in Parshat Vayikra. It's also what you read in, let's say, in Yeshayahu Hashem. That pasuk they bring down. Whatever the Tanakh has to say about Olah, is included in Torah Ta'olah.
Exactly. It didn't say we had rules for the Olah, but we didn't have Torah Ta'olah, and it's a much more comprehensive Torah than just the instructions we had in Parashat Vayikra.
I don't understand.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
I hate robbery with a burnt offering. Does that mean God doesn't want you to make a sin offering if you've committed robbery? That
No.
offering doesn't. I
No,
don't get,
I love justice. I hate robbery with a burnt offering. In other words, first of all, it's not a sin offering, is with the olah, that, it's, you can't just
Well,
bring an
remember-
olah.
The literal meaning of that text is you can't bring a robbed animal as a
Right.
sacrifice. All right, so that's, I think, pretty clear.
Oh,
Oh,
Yeah,
Well,
that's,
all
yeah,
right.
that's, I mean, we have that again in so many
that's the
different,
height of hypocrisy.
No, it
Yeah.
sounded like, somebody committed
Yeah.
robbery,
That's
Why-
what the text means.
expiate his sins.
The
for-
basic meaning of that text in your second Isaiah is God hates it when somebody thinks that they can atone for their robbery or for a sin by bringing an animal which was robbed
Yeah.
from another person.
kind of like later on in Jewish tradition, lulav hagazul, the stolen lulav.
Exactly.
The lulav, the etrog has to be yours. You can't steal it from someone. It's tremendously difficult ethical issue, when suddenly someone is convicted of fraud and robbery, and like, what about the institutions, for example, that received that person's money as a donation, as a gift? We had this problem that I mentioned before at the seminary. We named the library after Ivan Boesky after we rebuilt it. And then Ivan Boesky, makes headlines for being one of the people involved in the scandals on Wall Street. The name, and there's a question, should we give this money back? I don't know precisely all that happened, but I do know his name came off the library.
Yeah, they scrubbed his name off some of the shelves too.
Yeah.
But still, there's other issues. I mean, it's really hard to basically, to solve all these problems.
Oh, yeah.
I'm once in the Jewish Theological Seminary library, and I see someone I know very well from my shul who is, if for some reason, wearing a raincoat and a hat as he's doing what appears to be library classification and collection work. But I was a little struck by his garb. My first reaction was, and I did go over and say, "Hello, what are you doing here?" And he sort of deflected me, and then after that, it dawned on me what he was doing here was serving out the terms of his prison sentence that he had been sentenced to for some kind of a fraud, and I just completely forgotten about that. And they gave him community service as part of his sentence, and that was the community services working in a Jewish Theological Seminary library. So I obviously had to do a lot of reflection that day. In other words, it's really hard to deal with some of the problems. Look how Malachi brings up these problems also. Same type of stuff. So for some reason, nobody ever bothers to discuss this in First Temple times. In First Temple times, it's the other way around. What they're discussing is whether Hashem cares about sacrifice altogether, whereas in Second Temple times, an issue really seems to get to be made about the moral quality of a sacrifice you're bringing, etc. So, listen, I find one of the most fascinating things about religion is that and this starts with the Tanakh itself. Is no one verdict on one particular type of way of practicing religion. There are different books of the Tanakh have different values which are more important to them than other values of other books of the Tanakh. And by the time you're done with really studying Tanakh from one end to the other, you have been exposed to so many different ways of thinking that you're really forced to think about what you make your values. You can't come out of a serious study of the Tanakh, forget about the Talmud, and not realize that before you make up your minds about a value, you better give it a really lot of serious thought.
Yeah. Hence Torah Shabbal Peh. You have to reflect and develop and think. Yeah. Okay, Ricky, go ahead. Sorry. What is written above?
What is written above on the matter in Leviticus 5:23 And it shall come to pass that when one has sinned and is guilty, he shall restore the stolen goods which he robbed. Then after that, in Leviticus 6:2, this is the Torah of the burnt offering.
Again, now we have Torah rather than, okay, go ahead.
If you desire to
Getting there.
present an offering, you shall not rob anyone. Why? Because the Lord loved justice. I hate robbery with a burnt offering.
Okay, so kind of restating previous point. But now we go on here.
So when do you present a burnt offering so that I accept it? When your hands are clean of robbery. David said in Psalms 24:3-4, who may ascend the hill of the Lord, and who may stand in his holy place? One with clean hands and a pure heart.
Yeah, that's
From
a
the
a line that we use all the time. Mi alev ahar Adonai and mi yakum bimkom kodsho. We're going to recite it in the coming week when we return the Sefer Torah to the Ark.
Right, that's a
weekday.
perfect example, Rabbi Pop, of how our ideals today are a lot different than they were at the time of the Tanakh. For example, the Tanakh actually has what are called ancient liturgies, meaning the implication is, we don't want you in the temple if you don't have clean hands. Today, if we said we don't want anybody in the shul who doesn't have clean hands, we wouldn't have too many people in the shul as it is. I mean, in other words, very ideal. If you don't have clean hands, we don't even want you in the temple altogether. You're polluting the place.
Right.
It's so far away from the way we think today about bringing people into synagogues. You really, really have to think about these things.
Yeah. We say, even Isaiah says, Shalom, Shalom, l'rachok v'l'karov. We are trying to be very open, and it is an ongoing struggle within the community. It's like, on one hand, we want to be open, we want to bring everyone in. We especially hope that their lives change and they improve through contact with our tradition. But
I think that, back to Yudi's question or point, that the rabbis really made a very big distinction between the Beit HaMikdash and the Beit HaKnesset. And it set up the Beit HaKnesset very differently than the Beit HaMikdash.
That's a good point.
There's no place in the synagogue, including the inside the Arona Kodesh, that anyone would be prohibited from checking out, including a non-Jew.
Right.
Yeah, but we still
Whereas very clearly the Beit HaMikdash was limited for the Kohanim and on pain of death, certain parts, pain of death to anybody who was not qualified by their genealogy or religion to be in certain parts, on pain of death.
Yeah. Right. There is a real distinction.
So we still have access rules in synagogues, and basically, what I'm really getting at here is that we obviously, yes, of course, in order to basically set up an institution like the synagogue and say you can have one everywhere, meant that you're going to basically have to make a somewhat different. But the fundamental idea about the temple, the idea that you don't belong there if you have sins in your hands, I mean, that whole idea is a very difficult conception to begin with. I mean, how do I feel when I read about Isaiah coming into the temple on Chol past Sukkot, say, and telling them, you guys don't even have any business being here. Your hands are full of blood. You should stay home. God will be happier if you stayed home. Now, just imagine a rabbi saying that to this congregation today. It would have worked just as well. I mean, but somehow or other, it's inconceivable somebody would say that today.
But I
Well, we
think-
conceive of it all the time, frankly, but we just
I
don't
think
say
so
it.
in part.
Only kidding.
In part, it's that ancient Israel believed that the Beit HaMikdash was crucial for expiation of sin and in effect for salvation. Whereas rabbinic Judaism, clearly from Yochanan ben Zakkai
Yeah.
on, that no, it isn't.
I don't know. I haven't, I think, first of all, this whole thing with entrance liturgy, I think actually predates the whole construction of the temple. In other words, there was a time when basically it was felt that anybody should not, nobody should be approaching God altogether without clean hands. You know, God does not welcome people coming to approach him with hands that have been dirty with crime. Before you even approach God, you clean up your act, then you can approach. I just think the temple is an outstanding example of that. But all I'm saying is that whole idea, I think, is almost fundamental to the religious enterprise, at least as it's described in Tanakh, where it certainly isn't fundamental today.
And well, but
So
it's,
far away from a fundamental today, it's not even funny. The biggest contributors are the biggest sinners.
sometimes. Although, you know, I would.
I might go so far that Robert Pop used to say often.
Yeah.
Not just
Although just because unfortunately we've run out of time, and I really appreciate everybody's wonderful questions and insights and comments. It was great today, but to some extent, you know, in the temple you had a locus, if you will, for God's presence. You know, whether it's understood literally, symbolically, whatever, you had things that on some level, it's hard to say they were inherently sacred, because they were only sacred when they were all put together or when they were being taken down. But with the synagogue, or, you know, a post-temple, you still have the notion of the Shekhinah, of God's presence. And what we have on Yom Kippur and Rosh Hashanah is kind of this collective action to try and purge the community and make it fit for God's presence. Does it work? You know, or is it as effective as it should be? I don't know, but certainly
Okay,
there's
I like the
similar notion.
Hasidic interpretation that God enters the heart of those that allow that allows God's presence in.
Yeah, the Kutzker's famous, you know, so we had a pluralism Shabbat, and the speaker was wonderful. An Orthodox rabbi who happens still teaches at Hebrew Union College. He came into the conservative services at the end, and the person who was conducting services said, you know, Adon Olam may be found on page 162. You know, it was in the old Silverman Siddur, and he commented, Adon Olam may be found wherever you let him in. You know, so that I thought was a great comment. You know, there's more here. Milgram's comments on the asham, you know, and making a distinction between the noun and the verb asham, and then more on the blood prohibition that even enters halacha in Sefer HaChinuch. There's a lot, but you know, and wonderful comment of Rabbi Cook. But all for another time. But thanks again for wonderful participation.
thank you, Rabbi Pop.
Thank you, Rabbi.
I hope I'll see a number of you at dinner tomorrow night, or if not, just on Shabbat. Everyone should be healthy, and good luck in all of the Pesach preparations.
Bye.
Kol tov.
Both, and
Bye-bye.
Yasher Koach.
Oh, Baruch Tiyah.
Do you have a moment?
Yeah, I'll stay on. I'll say goodbye to everybody, and
I have been preparing some, updating a Yom HaShoah service. I remember what we talked about on Monday. It's something that uses a lot of Nelly Sachs, and I thought, if I remember correctly, the the video or the Zoom is at 7 o'clock.
Yeah.
We could meet like at 6:30 and have something beforehand and then have that, or we could do it after, however you would.
I would say do it after. Because getting people there at 6:30 will.
It's a 20-25 minute if you drag it out, including lighting 6 candles. But it uses a lot of Nelly Sachs, and it ends with the Holocaust Kaddish. But it tends to be powerful.
Could you edit it down? Because I think people also, I mean, as you know, from the comments from presidents and Mindy and Stephanie, I think there was a sense that some people will want to discuss this afterwards. So, if we can edit it down from 25 minutes.
I'll put it together and you'll see it's all going to be possible to trim it however you want.
Yeah, because I really do think we should be doing something together more than just watching a film, basically. Not that I imagine this will be very good, and I think it's important to connect with community, but giving us something to do as a community, I think would be very, very important.
Right.
Yeah, I would agree. I kind of like to do it beforehand and set a whole mood for this.
That was my idea, but
yeah, that would be my preference, but I have a feeling it's going to work better for everyone afterwards. But we're going to discuss it at our exec committee meeting this Sunday. So
is that set for Monday night or Tuesday? Monday night, right?
What?
The Yom HaShoah program.
Yom HaShoah, I think, is on. Is Yom HaShoah on?
Is it Tuesday?
Tuesday?
27th is a Tuesday. 27th.
Okay, so then it would be for then it would be for Monday night.
Yeah. So Monday night, the 17th.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I will raise that, even though 6:30 is early for a lot of people. I really agree with you. I think your ideas on many levels makes more sense to do something in preparation.
I should be able to finish everything up on it in the next hour or two, and I'll send it to you. And then
okay, I'm not going to be able to look at it till next week at this point.
Yeah. You'll have it if you want to look at it before the executive meeting.
Yeah, that would be very helpful. I would like to look at it because I really, I like the idea very much.
Good.
All right, everybody well by you, I hope?
We're all good.
Thank God.
We're finding we do mashi, the stuffed gray squash. And I have to find good ones for so that's we've got just about everything else we've already bought and it's frozen and such, but and we're going to start koshering probably on Sunday. So we can start cooking early enough, and we'll just paper plates and stuff until we get to Pesach.
Yeah. I don't think Allison has done any shopping, which frustrates me. She constantly denies the approach of Pesach, and she refuses to do shopping early. And then, of course, we're frustrated when there's nothing there. But what can I do? And frankly, last night, not only was she working all day, and then at Hebrew school, but right after Hebrew school, she ran out to Costco because she had to do the shopping for tomorrow night's dinner. So it's not as if she's not been occupied with a million things.
Right.
So, but
I just mention because we found it very helpful between Monsey. Between Bingo and Rockland Kosher Market, there wasn't anything you couldn't find. I mean, the only thing, and we're just going a slightly different route. is to try to find kosher Pesach temer handy. I don't think it exists.
What is it?
Temer handy, tamarind paste.
Oh, tamarind paste. Okay, that, yeah. Yeah, I don't know, because I think all the people who make it are certainly not Jewish. And and are in locations where kashrut supervision is not as common as it might be. Although I don't know why. I mean,
The basic question is, what do they do to dry things? The process of drying fruit is usually of spraying flour on it to pull the moisture out. So that's why the expense of dried fruit for Yom Tov. But with tamarind, I'm not even sure. It's all in Southeast Asia, basically.
Yeah.
It's India and particularly Thailand. It would be interesting. I'm not going to bother with different things, but to check with my local Chabad Rebbe. You've got a colleague in Bangkok. Does anyone supervise tamarind paste?
Listen, it may not be so crazy. My attitudes toward Chabad are really, really changing. I'm very familiar with the Chabadnikim who have nothing to do with anybody unless it concerns money they're getting. And I know how much Chabad can come in and totally disrupt the community. On the other hand, I had a lot of very positive experience with a lot of Chabadnikim who are, there are reasons why they're shluchim, because they're nice people, they're good people.
Yeah.
And the fact that they're doing stuff that the Jewish community as a whole should be doing, you want kosher food wherever you are, you want a Seder, you want a minyan, they provide it. I can't even provide a daily minyan, even counting men and women.
Right.
So, I really respect them for a lot of the stuff that they do.
Yeah. I had early along, I had my major kinda with the Rebbe, because he did not accept Ethiopian Jews as Jewish. Still wouldn't accept Ethiopian kids into their ganim. But a lot of his other stuff, a lot of the other stuff has in my mind has atoned for that.
Yeah. And again, I often tell people there's Chabad and there's Chabad. When I was in San Francisco at the time, we were using a Chabadnik, because the conservative synagogues, using a Chabadnik as our Moel. That was great. First of all, he was fast. He was really fast, but he was wonderful with the parents. And it didn't matter if both parents were Jewish or not. He was just really good with them. And if the mother wasn't Jewish, he would bring his own Eidim, but they weren't guys with kaftans and black coats. A couple of Orthodox Jews we knew we could trust.
Yeah.
So he was wonderful. And like I said, really, really good. If I had boys, I probably would have called him and flown him out. And I think of the Chabadnikim in Ottawa. First in Detroit, where they had enough money and they had enough supporters that they really had nothing to do with anyone. Of course, they would very often come to B'nai Mitzvah parties at my synagogue just to visit with the family, because the family gave them oodles of money, but they didn't have anything to do with the community. And in Ottawa, one Chabad rabbi and his wife were involved in all kinds of community things. And a lot of people were upset by how he came in and set up his place. And of course, we're weakening other Hebrew schools, but he moved into an area where people were starting to move to, but there was no synagogue there. And, sometimes I have to say competition is good for business.
Yeah.
If the Jewish community stepped up its work in Jewish education, doing the things that we need to do, well, then they wouldn't run the Chabad.
Right. Right.
So,
Okay.
now, since we're not going to solve all of world Jewry's problems, you can go back to work, and so will I.
Indeed. Have a good
All
afternoon.
right, have a great day.
And
Take
regards
care.
to all
Thank you.
for Shabbat Shalom and
Yes.
see you Saturday morning.
Yeah, and thank you
I'll
very
send you the
much.
material later today.
Yeah, thank you very much for your participation this morning. I really appreciated it.
Do you remember, I'll ask you, I wrote it down, but I didn't get it fast enough. I want to look up there was a reference to Tikva
Freimer Kensky.
Kremerkensky, the influence of Atrahasis, was that it?
Yeah. It was an article in biblical archaeology, more your field. Let me see, it's in his bibliography. Okay. Milgrams, who's this? Harder, let me just get there. No. Right, I didn't even talking about Leviticus. I didn't mention Yitzhak Knoll. There's so many. Getting there. Wait a moment. Here we go. Tikva Freimer Kensky, 1977. The Atrahasis epic and its significance for our understanding of Genesis 1-9.
And it's biblical archaeologist.
Yeah, BA, volume 40, 147 to 55. I have no idea if that's available online. I'm probably going to check it.
I'm registered at Gestor, and I get up all kinds of stuff from them.
Yeah.
that way online. So I'll try at least.
Okay.
Great.
Hatzlacha.
Toda rabah.
Okay. All too, Danny. Have a great day.
You too. Bye-bye.
Bye.